ask. Um, and we're on. All right, welcome. Oh, now I get to see people. It's beautiful. All right. So it's a whole new world, as they say in the Disney movie. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, welcome to a beautiful night of learning. This is the 7th night of Hanukkah, and Hanukkah is a time for or, time for light, a light of Torah, and the menorah represents Torah. So this is a great chance for all of us to learn together. The Parsha Mikeitz is usually read on Hanukkah, but this year we missed it by a day, by a little smidgen, because Mikeitz is read the day after Hanukkah this year. But still a lot of interesting insights, a lot of things to learn. And with no further ado, let's get right into the sources. I had a request this morning to sort of focus more on not necessarily reading the Hebrew, but to basically translate and explain. And I'm going to try my best to do that. It's not easy to change one's style, but if that's what helps, then that's what I'm going to do. And let's see, I'm going to share my screen. And I guess I'm going to share that, which is not what I wanted to share. There we go. Okay. Yes, Baruch Hashem, Sefaria, YISD, that's our shul 5781. That's the year 0110. It's the 10th Parsha in the first book of the Torah in Bireisheet. So, no further ado, the first pasuk says, Vayhi miketz shratayim yamim u'Pharaoh cholem v'hinei omed al hayor. After 2 years' time, 2 years after what? That's 2 years after the events of last week, when Yosef was put in prison. Pharaoh wakes up from a dream, or he has a dream, and then eventually he wakes up. He has another dream, and then he wakes up, and he's not able to interpret the dream. He's going to gather all of his khartumim, which are either astrologers or stargazers. Interestingly enough, Rav Hirsch says they're hieroglyphic experts, right? So what are hieroglyphics? That's what people in ancient Egypt, that's how they used to write, with symbols, all kinds of weird symbols. So who's the best person to interpret the symbols in your dream? Somebody whose career has to do with symbols, right? They're reading symbols all the time. I don't mean the snare drum and the cymbals, right? I mean real like symbolology. Symbolology, is that a word? Well, let's make that a word now. And so the after Yosef interprets the dream to Pharaoh's liking, Pharaoh frees him, makes him second in command. Basically, the dream is that there are going to be 7 years of plenty in Egypt, followed by 7 years of the opposite of plenty, of famine. And if Egypt properly, smartly prepares for those 7 years of famine, then during those 7 years of plenty, then not only will they survive, but they'll actually be successful. That's what ends up happening, more or less, under Yosef's command. And then, of course, his brothers need to come down for food, because Canaan is also in this famine. And then Yosef has an entire ruse where he pretends to not know them, and actually he recognizes them as his brothers. But and then he begins to do some things that seem like very terrible things, unless we see different insights into why he does them. So, with no further ado, let's get into more detail. So, the pasuk I just quoted, that after 2 years' time, Pharaoh had a dream. The second word in the pasuk is Mikeitz, which is the name of the parsha, which means from the end. And what the Midrash does, and we're going to have 2 Midrashim in today's class, actually, the first, both of them on this first pasuk. And something you need to know about studying Midrash is that the way Midrash works is they quote a pasuk, then they quote another pasuk, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with the first pasuk they quoted, usually somewhere else in Tanakh, completely unrelated. To quote Monty Python, now time for something completely different. And then that's what they do. They starts talking about something that doesn't seem to have any connection to the parsha. And what the Mefarshim do, what the commentaries on the parsha do, they try to make connections. What is the lesson, and how do we apply it back to the parsha? So we're going to have 2 examples of that, and some hopefully we'll be able to get some insights into how Midrash works in general. And a completely other subject. I'm deciding whether to share this with you or not. Yeah, there goes my political correctness. I'm going to share this with you. I'm a part of a group of educators on Facebook. I used to teach, as you know, and I still feel like I'm teaching. Believe it or not, look around. This is kind of a class. And in teaching, I like to get different resources. The Family Feud game that we'll be playing later is from one of those resources, as I'll mention then. But somebody in that teaching group asked an interesting question about Hanukkah. One of their students asked that they want to know more about Yehuda Maccabee's mother, okay, Mrs. Hashmonai, right, Matityahu's wife. So what can you tell me about her? Is what the student asked. And the teacher said, I don't know. I'll look at the sources. I'll see what I can find out. And then this person asked the question. This teacher asked the question. This group of teachers. And what was the response? So from people who are people of emet, of truth, the response is, we don't know anything about her. Her name doesn't pop up in Apocrypha or anything. Her name is not in the Talmud. We don't know, or the Midrash, or nothing. We don't know. Doesn't mean she didn't exist. Obviously, he had a mother, but not everybody's wife gets mentioned. What's Noach's wife's name? So there's a Gemara that tells us. What's Abraham's mother's name? Right? Again, there's a Gemara in Bava Kama Bava Metzia that tells us. But that's not. Is that relevant to the story? We need to know everybody's name. This isn't a history book. We don't need to know everybody's name. So the response from some of the teachers in this group was, tell the student to write a story with Yehuda Maccabee's mother and make up a name, make up a backstory, and that's going to be a great opportunity for what they call a modern midrash. So this phrase is bothering me. It's eating away at me. That modern midrash. That modern midrash means some sort of mythology that you're making up. It's modern, as opposed to other midrash, which is also made up, but it's just other. It's older. It's not modern. It's old midrash, old made up stuff. That's not what midrash is. Midrash is emet. Midrash is truth. Midrash is part of Torah Shabbal Peh. We get halacha from the midrash sometimes. Sifrei, these are halachic works of midrash. They're not just made up. People weren't just bored and what should we decide to do for such and such a case? I don't know. What did we do for Yehuda Maccabee's mother's case? We don't do that. That's not how Jews operate. If we don't know the answer, we say we don't know. Rashi says 13, 14 times throughout Chumash and the Gemara, I don't know. Because the answer, if you don't know, the answer is I don't know, and that's okay. You can't know everything, and sometimes the older sources will tell us, but they're not made up answers. So let's get back to the midrash, the real midrash, not the modern midrash, not the made up midrash. The real midrash says on the pasuk Vayhi Mikeitz Yamim, after 2 years' time, again from the word kates, says kates sam lachoshech. Pasuk in Iyov and Job, where it says that Hashem created an end to the darkness. And the Midrash then continues, and I have it here in English in the source if you're interested. The Midrash then continues to say, what is darkness? Darkness is the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. It confuses us and makes us do the wrong thing. And there will be an end to it. And the Pasuk in Iyov is telling us Hashem created an end to it. Okay, very nice. So that's the Midrash, and that's, again, the Midrash is making is saying something from another pasuk completely elsewhere in Tanakh, and now it's our job as people who study Torah to try to find some sort of connection. What is the lesson? What are we supposed to learn from this Midrash? So to get to our first answer, we're going to go to the Beta Levy. So the Beta Levy, again, written about 100 years ago, and unfortunately written only about the first 1.5 books of the Torah. He passed away before he had a chance to finish the rest of Shemot and Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim. But Baruch Hashem, we have a lot of insights in Bireisheet. How do you know that there's a lot of insights from the Beta Levy on Bireisheet? Well, we've quoted him almost every week. So that's a good indication that he knows. He has some interesting things to say. So on this pasuk in Iyov and this Midrash again, Bireisheet Rabba 89:1, he says that Hashem placed an end to the choshech. What are we trying to learn here? That it's also a case. It's also an end for Yosef. So, of course, it's the end. We know. Just keep reading the next pasuk, in the next few psukim, the next parak or two, you'll find out that Yosef gets out of prison and everything is good for him. What's this trying to teach you? So he says, in general, you need to understand, this is normal basic physics. The world runs on cause and effect, right? If I buy, he says, if I buy merchandise, if I buy something and want to make money from it, then increase the price, supply and demand, increase the price and price and resell it somewhere else. I want to make a profit, right? So what caused the profit? My original purchase. In other words, the effect was I made money. The cause was that I bought something at a low price and resold it at a higher price. That's how it usually works, right? That's how it should work in Teva, in nature. But Hashem Hashem places the end. In other words, it's not all nature. There's also a mystical, spiritual context that we need to keep in mind. And that is, Hashem decrees in heaven what will happen. And everything else you did before was just your hishtadlut, and we'll talk about hishtadlut in a moment. It was all just your own effort, but really the end result was going to be the end result anyway. In other words, it's almost the end of the tax year, right? In about 15 days, it'll be the end of the tax year, and you're going to be doing your taxes hopefully before February, so you can get some money back, so you can then give more money to the shul, etc. All right, I'm just giving you ideas. And what you're going to notice is that you made, God willing, you made some money, hopefully. And you might think, I made this money because of my investments, because of my work. No, you made this money because Hashem decided on Rosh Hashanah that you would make this money. What you did in between to cause that to happen, to make that work, that was nice. That's part of the curse of Adam, that he has to, by the sweat of your brow, you're gonna make your bread. But really, your money was established already before. That doesn't mean now you can go be a bum and you'll still make the same amount of money. You have a responsibility, and we'll talk about hishtadlut in a moment in the next comment. But that's the idea. So the lesson is that Hashem Kates Sam Lachosha. He put the end. He put the end result in the end already. There will be an end. There will be a conclusion that Hashem is aiming towards, and everything else are just events, are just the eddies of water, just going towards the eventual direction that the water is going to go into. I don't know what's going on here. Okay, so Baruch Hashem. So So what does this have to do with Yosef? The same thing happened with Yosef. You might think that Pharaoh's dream was the cause that allowed Yosef to be free. Mikeitz, from the 2 years after the end of the last we heard of Yosef, that's when Pharaoh has his dream. In other words, Yosef's liberation is the reason Pharaoh had his dream, not the other way around. It's not that Pharaoh's dream saved Yosef. Yosef's needing to be saved caused Pharaoh to have the dream. It's the effect that causes the cause. That's what Kates Sam Lachoshech indicates, according to the Beta Levy. And that's an important lesson for life. That's how we live. That's how the Jew lives. Everything leads towards a certain conclusion, and we do what we must, and then what Hashem has planned is what's going to happen. We do what we can. We'll talk about again doing what we can in the next Midrash, because the next Midrash says, Ashri HaGever Asher Sam Hashem Miftacho. Happy. This is a pasuk in Tehillim 40. Oh, wow, there is no translation. That's interesting. So chapter 40, verse 5 in Tehillim says that happy is the man who places his trust in Hashem. So what's this indicating? This is indicating, the Midrash here continues, and Rashi quotes this in his commentary on the Torah, that Yosef is sort of punished, that he had to wait 2 more years in jail. He had to languish in prison. And by the way, prison in Egypt was not, 3 square meals a day, exercise time for the internet. You can go get your law degree. No, the prison system in Egypt was a pit in the ground, that you were in the elements. When it rained and you were standing in the wrong place, you got rained upon. Right? If you see pictures of how prisoners of war were treated in Vietnam in the 60s and 70s, you have maybe an idea of how the prisoners were treated in Egypt. So here you have. Yosef is somewhat punished. Why is he punished? Because he put his faith in the butler. He told the butler to tell Pharaoh to remember him, and to tell Pharaoh that there's a Jew. He didn't do anything wrong, and please let him out of prison. So he put too much faith in this person, and therefore he didn't trust enough in Hashem. That's how most people understand it. That's kind of how the Midrash is usually explained, and that's basically what Rashi seems to say. Chazon Ish wrote a book on having faith in Hashem. It's called Emuna Ubitachon. So the first chapter is called Emuna. Second chapter is called Bitachon. It's called Emuna Ubitachon. So faith and trust. That's for lack of better translations. So in chapter 2 of the Sefer, in part Vav, in part 6, this is what he writes. I'll just read you from an English translation. Enough, even though the main point of trusting in Hashem is the obligation of the heart, with some practical mitzvot connected to it, such as the obligation to refrain from acting against others, still there are some limitations related to the efforts that one is allowed to make. You can't just do anything to effect something. I'll give you an example. This today's Daf Yomi says, so you're not allowed to benefit. You're not allowed to take benefit from a shera tree. It's a tree that's been worshipped for purposes of idolatry. So what does it mean to take benefit from it? It means, for example, chop it down for firewood. So then you might think, you're chopping it down for firewood, you're going to burn it. You say, I'm destroying the shera tree anyway, and it provides nice warmth for me. It's warming my house, etc., etc. So you're not allowed to do that. One of the reasons is you might thank the God that you think it was supposed to be worshipped through this tree. But there's another thing you're also not allowed to do, and this might surprise you, because we've made so much noise, especially lately, about how important it is to protect your health, and it is. It's a very important mitzvah. But did you know that you're not allowed to take the medicine or use the Asherah tree for refuah? Let's say the Asherah tree grows some sort of fruit, and you want to ground the fruit up to or berries or whatever, you can ground it up and make it into medicine. That medicine will heal you. You're not allowed to use the Asherah tree for that, because people might think you might think that it's the god of the Asherah tree that helped heal you. It's a very difficult thing, but you can't. In other words, you can't do just anything, right? If you're sick, reference. This is a much longer discussion, and I don't know if I'm qualified to speak about it just yet. But there's a lot of halachic issues with something like alternative medicine. Medicine has to be, for lack of a better term, there needs to be a scientific method that has proven the medicine to be effective for you to use that medicine. You can't just, I'm desperate, I'll do anything. You can't do things out of desperation. So says the Chazon Ish on that topic, we have the obligation to consider carefully any act before we do it, making sure that it is in keeping with the trait of trust, of bitachon, of trusting in Hashem. Our sages said in the Midrash Rabba on Pashat Mikeitz, that's our pasuk, that Yosef Hatzadik's exertion in asking the chief butler to remember him to Pharaoh showed that he was not serious enough in his trust of Hashem. The verse says, happy is the man who places his trust in Hashem. That's the verse we just quoted. That is speaking of Yosef, and does not turn to the untrustworthy people, says the rest of the verse, because Yosef approached the chief butler. It was decreed that he would stay in prison for an additional 2 years. In other words, Yosef knew that his salvation was not dependent on any exertion on his part, that everything comes from Hashem. He had bitachon. He trusted in Hashem. So what's the problem? Everything comes from Hashem. Since human beings are obligated to act and not to depend on miracles, Yosef was obligated to make use of the opportunity and to enlist the help of the chief butler. There's nothing wrong with him asking the chief butler for help. That's part of his shtadlut. He's supposed to have some effort in achieving his desired goal. But it is not in the nature of people of that rank to remember and do favors. And therefore, this act of Yosef's was not appropriate, since it was an act of desperation. He didn't ask the chief butler because the chief butler was somebody who would do something for him. Adarabba, Pumfa Carrot. The chief butler was not somebody who would do a favor for anybody. He was the chief butler. Chief butlers don't do favors. They don't have to. They don't feel obligated to anybody. And when Yosef asked them to remember him, to do him a favor, he was actually giving up his trust in Hashem, saying, I'm desperate. I'll do anything. I'll even ask somebody I know isn't going to usually listen to me. The act of desperation is not something the Jews are allowed to do. No matter how desperate we feel, the kavana of this midrash is teaching you a very important lesson. You can be a bitachon. You can trust in Hashem like Yosef Hatzadik. Call him Yosef Hatzadik. He trusted in Hashem. Baruch Hashem. He trusted in Hashem, but that little tiny bit where he trusted a little bit in, I'm trusting in Hashem, but I need to do his ishtadlut. Ishtadlut is a relative thing. This effort, ishtadlut is a translation of effort. Your own human effort into achieving your goal is called ishtadlut. The ishtadlut that you put into something has to be balanced against your trust in Hashem. Everybody's different, so that doesn't mean, for example, that somebody who works 9 hours a day and it gets home too tired to learn Torah, right? That doesn't mean that they should cut down on their work schedule. If they're not able to, they'll lose their job altogether if they decide to leave work, an hour early. That's not a good thing. They have to learn. Every man is obligated to learn. They have to earn a parnasa. They have to do some sort of hishtadlut, some sort of effort and work to earn a living. But if something goes wrong, they shouldn't be desperate and then cut out their time for learning. It's a much deeper, longer discussion, obviously, relative to a person's situation and individualized like that. Chazal in the poskim will give ideas of what's best to do. All right, so let's keep going. We've spent quite a bit of time on the first pasuk, which is normal. It's jam-packed. Our next commentary is going to be a cheap plug for our Monday night class from Rav Munk. Rav Munk wrote several books. His most famous book is called Call of the Torah. It's a commentary on the Torah. Actually, it might be his second most famous book. Probably his most famous book is The World of Prayer. It's a 2-volume book from Feldheim. That's a very popular book teaching people how to pray. The commentary on the Sidur, very nice insights. Now, his very unknown book, the book that we're going to be learning next week, is really a work of mysticism of Kabbalah. It's called Ascent to Harmony. And harmony is how he translates Tiferet, which he says is the goal of humankind, is to reach Tiferet. We'll talk about that. And what he does, and what I really want to do today is I want to point out to you how he works, how his mind more or less operates. Monday night we'll hear more from his daughter, God willing, about what she knows about how her father learns and what her father understands. But meanwhile, let's look at this pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'shamitan." So this is the butler talking to Pharaoh about Yosef. He says, "V'shamitan." Back in prison, there was nar ivri eved b'sar tabachim v'nitzaper lo v'yiftar lanu et chalomotenu ish k'chalomo patar. So there was a Hebrew youth, a nar, which is a kind of a derogatory term. He was there with us, a servant of the chief steward. And when we told him our dreams, he interpreted them for us, telling each of us the meaning of his dream. So we're going to talk a little bit about dream interpretation now. Just so you know, just the next pasuk says, "Vahi kasher patar lanu ken haya ito." Sorry, uti heshiv al kani ve'oto tala. So just as he interpreted, exactly as he interpreted, is how it happened. I was restored to my post, and the other one was beheaded. It was hanged. Allah, he was hanged. All right. So the Gemara in Brachot teaches a very interesting thing. And this is all the way at the end of the Gemara in Brachot, where it talks about dream interpretation, and it does quite a bit about that, but not for now. Right now, what you need to know is that the Gemara finally concludes with Rava says from this pasuk, Duhu Shafar le ein chalme ish kol chalmo petar. So the way that sorry, that's not what I wanted to say. Okay, Rabbi Elazar. Dama Rabbi Elazar, minayin shekol halomot cholchim achar hapeh. All halomot, all dreams, go after the mouth. In other words, all dreams, the conclusion of the dream has to do with the interpretation. What does that mean? How can that work? Especially considering what we just said about Hashem makes things happen. And there's hishtadlut, you put in your own effort. So what's going on now? It's not your effort. It's not Hashem. It's somebody's interpretation that's going to give you the conclusion of your dream. What? That doesn't sound right at all. So he says in his in Call of the Torah, Rav Munk says, from this verse, this is translated by Art Scroll. It was originally, by the way, translated by Feldheim, interestingly enough, and then they only translated Bireisheet, and then they decided not to continue with the series, and then Art Scroll took it out. Anyway, and it was just as he interpreted for us, so did it happen from this verse. Rabbi Elazar formulates the rule that dreams follow the interpretation. We said all that in the first paragraph. So he continues, to be sure, not only do dreams depend on their interpretation, but more generally, so does human destiny itself. In other words, everything assumes the reality of the interpretation which one places on it. What does that mean? Might not this apply to the whole of our existence? What is decisive in our lives is not so much the facts and events themselves as the way in which we see them, as optimists or pessimists, idealists or materialists, believers or atheists. In the final analysis, everything depends on our interpretation. Dreams just provide the classical example where this principle applies in its most direct form. So, in other words, dream interpretation and how the dream continues and concludes has to do with your attitude. The link is what you think, as Dr. Mentel likes to say, right? What you think, what you're thinking is going to be the conclusion is what you're going to live. You're going to live that way. It's interesting, by the way, totally, not completely, but I was reading Rav Hirsch's commentary on this week's parsha, and I saw an interesting quote, and I recognized it from Macbeth, right, from Shakespeare's Macbeth. So Hirsch quotes Macbeth. He quotes other things too. Anyway, so in that quote from Macbeth, beautiful quote. What's Macbeth about? Macbeth gets visited by three people who tell him that he's going to be the king, and he's nowhere near the king. And of course, back then you can't just become king. You grew into it, or or had to kill somebody. So eventually he ends up to fulfill this dream, which he thinks is prophecy. He goes and does this thing that he commits. He commits. He kills the king. I'm forgetting the word for the something side.
Annihilate?
No, the king aside. I don't know. I forget, there's a word for killing the king. Yeah, he assassinates the king, and in doing so, he starts the next part. That's not the only prophecy he gets. He also says eventually bad things are going to happen, and so eventually bad things happen to him. It's a tragedy for a reason. Anyway, so just so you know, the rest of this comment from Rav Munk is more about dream interpretation. I have it up here. He references back to his commentary in 38.5 about Yosef's dreams and how to interpret dreams in general. So I leave this up here in the sources if you want to ever go back to that, and it's quite worthwhile. But for our purposes, I just want you to know that dream interpretation does not mean that when you interpret the dream, that's how it's going to happen. What it means is if you're going to interpret things as a pessimist, you're going to live life as a pessimist. If you're going to interpret things as an optimist, you're living life as an optimist, and your life will be optimistic. There's always going to be a silver lining. There's always going to be a positive, no matter what. And that's, by the way, the Jewish perspective on things is an optimistic one. Hashem placed an end to the darkness. That's a pasuk in Iyov we quoted earlier. Right? There is an end. There will be a conclusion to the pandemic. There will be a conclusion to good presidencies, bad presidencies. Whoever's in charge of the country won't last forever. Okay, things will always turn up for the best. Why? How? We don't always know. But like somebody said in Shul this morning, I don't know why Hashem is doing this. Good, you're right. I don't know why Hashem is doing this either. But Baruch Hashem, you recognize one very important thing. Hashem is doing this. Forget about the first few words of your sentence. I don't know why. Ignore that. Hashem is doing this. That's the important thing. All right? And what, how, we don't know. All right. So the same thing with Yosef's life. All right. Enough of a sermon, Rabbi. Let's get back to the psukim. So 7 psukim later, Paro is retelling the dream to Yosef. And he says an interesting thing, and hopefully we'll have time for 2 more commentaries, maybe 3 more. Let's see how much time we have. We have 10 minutes. We got this. I have confidence in myself. Okay, so the pasuk says, "V'hine sheva parot acherot." So he has this dream that there's 7 very beautiful, nice cows. Okay, and then 7 very measly, skinny cows, and those 7 measly cows eat the 7 big cows, and they stay measly and tiny and thin and scrawny. Okay, so that's what he says. Hine sheva parot acherot. Other cows were there. Olot acharehen. They came after them. They were standing next to them. Dalot v'raot. They were scrawny, thin, ugly. V'raot tor ma'od. They're very ugly. V'rakot basar. They had hardly any meat. Below ra'iti kahena b'chol eretz Mitzrayim l'roah. I've never seen the cows like that before, that bad in Egypt in my whole life. So I want to share 2 things with you right now. One is from the Khatam Sofer, and one is my kids know my own chidush. By the way, I have chidushim on some things in the Torah. I encourage everybody to have chidushim. That's part of learning Torah. You're supposed to, your insight, what you bring to Torah, should have a chidush. That does not mean modern midrash. It does not mean it's false. You should check it out after you come up with an interesting insight or an idea. You should check with other people and see if it makes sense. If it's emet, if it fits with other chazals, you can't just make stuff up. I think Yehuda Maccabee's mother's name was such and such. You can't just do that, but you can interpret based on other chazal. So I'll give you an example of one of my favorite chidushim. Actually comes from this pasuk. Says the Khatam Sofer, and that's what we have here. The reason that in his dream, it doesn't say that he's never seen cows like that before. Pharaoh adds that. Why does he add that? So the Khatam Sofer says, based on other things that you see in the dream that weren't mentioned or that were mentioned in or they did not see in the dream, that later on were mentioned in the retelling, Paro makes some changes. And he quotes from the Siforno that these changes, a lot of the time, had to do with how serious he wanted Yosef to take the dream, right? So, for example, the fact that these cows, or maybe he doesn't even remember some things, and Yosef interprets it correctly anyway. So, for example, in his dream, the skinny cows were standing right next to the fat cows. He doesn't say that over in his repetition of the dream, how close they were. And the reason why it's important is because the fact that they were so close together, says Rav Hirsch, shows you how quickly this would happen. This is about to happen. And that's what Yosef says in his interpretation. Hashem is showing you that this is going to happen immediately. You need to do things, you need to fix this problem now. You need to prepare for the famine now. And so the fact that he says that reminded Paro that was an aspect of the dream. That's one of the things that made him confident that Yosef was correct. Now, so that's what the Khatam Sofer says about why he said that these cows are so ugly that he's never seen cows like that before in his life, and that's so he wanted Yosef to take this dream seriously. Okay, that's the Khatam Sofer. I have my own chidush on this. There are other times, other commentaries in other places in this retelling of the dream. Other commentaries, including Rav Hirsch, point out that some of the parts of the retelling were actually Paro lying for one reason or another. So my opinion is the reason that he mentions that these cows were ugly and he's never seen cows like this before in Egypt before in his life is that he's lying. And he has seen cows like this in Egypt before. How do I know? Very simple. Have you ever been to the zoo? Like the San Diego Zoo or the Wild Animal Park? How many different species of cows are there? Or other animals that kind of can be called a cow if you don't know any better, right? It's an animal. It's on four legs. It's got horns. How do you know it's a cow? How do you know it's not a buffalo? How do you know it's not, I don't know, some sort of gazelle? How do you know it's a cow? You know how you know it's a cow? Because you've seen it before amongst other cows. So why is he lying? Why does he have to tell Yosef that he hasn't seen a cow like that in Egypt before? Because he's the king of Egypt. And kings are proud of their country. They're not going to say something negative about it. As we see, by the way, throughout history, when you see historians writing about, Herodotus writes about the history of Greece, or when you see the poem Ozymandias, right? The king isn't saying, my country was a poor, weak country, and I led it to destruction. No, kings never say that. Presidents never say that. They're always very proud of their country. They're always saying what good leaders they are and all the good things that they've done. So Paro is not going to say, I saw ugly cows, you know the kind of cows, like the cows I saw 2 days ago. He's not going to say that because he's proud of his country. He's proud of his land. He's proud. He has ga'ava. So that's my chidush there. Very quickly, we have time for one more. I guess we'll have to save the famous Ramban's attack on Rav and Rashi for next time. But
would it be question?
Sure.
Oh, I don't know if maybe like the cow. Actually, it's not a question. It's more like a statement. Okay. With the cows, do you think like he would lie just to be like, oh, I've never seen cows because I'm so wealthy and powerful. Like I've never seen a skinny cow because all my cows are like big and fat.
Yeah, that would be a very funny lie because then he has no idea what a cow is. He calls them parot, so he must have seen cows. And this is Egypt, so they probably had cow hieroglyphics, and I don't think it was possible he's never seen a cow, even if he's wealthy.
Or like to fake that he's never seen a cow that skinny.
No, I'm saying he couldn't say that. Yeah, I'm saying he's seen cows, but he's never seen a cow that skinny. He has seen a cow that skinny. He's lying that he hasn't. Same reason as you're saying. Yeah. Because he's too wealthy or his country's too wealthy to have skinny cows like that. Mm-hmm. Not skinny cows like ice cream.
that ice cream's not so good.
That would be a good thing to see in your country. So just real quick, one last comment. We really don't have a lot of time. I'm debating about whether to learn it or whether just to see if there's any more questions. Let's see if there's any questions first.
You have matches?
Matches?
Yeah.
No, I guess that's not a question.
That is
All
a
right.
question, though.
I don't have matches. I do have matches. I'm in shul. Okay. Okay. So then, there you go. Kosher matches. You can eat them. Don't actually do that.
Or Bela does that. Fun fact.
Gross. Okay. All right. So no. Okay. So Bireisheet, we have the pasuk. So the plan that Yosef gives them of saving up for the famine was very pleasing to them. They're very happy with the plan. Why were they happy with the plan? Why were they sure that he was right? So as I said before, this is from the Meshech Chochmah. The Meshech Chochmah points out, and I have the source here too, that he left out certain details about how close they were standing, etc., etc., and Yosef interpreted it anyway. Despite that, and even during good years, he will have to prepare, which is what the message was. Even during the good years, even during the all the plenty, still they have to prepare for the famine. It's not an easy thing to think about. During the Roaring 20s, they weren't really preparing for the depression of the 1930s, so they didn't know about it. So why would they prepare? Only some economists warned about it, but okay, Hoover warned about it, but we're not going to talk about that history now. So anyway, that's what we have. The last thing we were going to talk about tonight is why Yosef hid his identity. And just real quick, I want to point out when the commentaries talk about such things, like that he was hiding his identity, it wasn't to be mean, to be evil. They're not just being apologetic. We're not playing apologetics here. The reason that the rabbis, like Rashi says, he was trying to fulfill the dreams, for instance. That's what Rashi says. So he had dreams that his brothers were bowing down to him. So of course he's going to then follow through and do that too. So that's not how that works. That's not why Rashi said that. Rashi says that because we know that Yosef is not an evil person. He doesn't kill off his brothers with his first opportunity. He's not stupid. He's not dumb. He's very intelligent. He's wise. He's a navon. He's a chacham. And we have to keep that in mind when we look at his character. For it to be consistent, a pashut shot must be that he had a good reason to do what he's doing, and it wasn't just evil. So we're not just trying to apologize for him. We need to see what the proper reason is. I have some sources there. I have the Rashi, the Ramban, and Rav Hirsch, but we're out of time, and we're ready to start our next event. Okay.